Well, we are talking about those people. Isn't it fun to just kind of come together and go, hey, you know what? Hey, we got to talk about them. We got to talk about those, and it's like, hey, that's going to be cool because we get to talk about other people. And we don't have to look at ourselves. We don't have to think about ourselves. And we don't have to be worried about anybody talking about anything that might approach who I am. That's not exactly what we're doing with this. That what we're doing is we're looking at, hey, what are some of those types of people? And where are we guilty of being those types of people? Where is it that we might find ourselves being like that and we go, I need to make some adjustments. I can't always be that person. I need to make some adjustments. I need to see the reality of what's going on. There's also a side to it that says, hey, what is it that I could be doing since I do life with those people? How can I do that life best? How can I be in that kind of environment? How can I be in that kind of a relationship? And how can I make the most of it? So last week we talked about needy people. That was those people that we looked at last week. Needy people. Whether they're emotionally needy, whether they're financially needy, whether they're physically needy, whether they're spiritually needy, whether it's a health issue, but needy people. And we looked at this and we said there's two ways that we end up offering support. That if we're willing to be merciful, if we're willing to say, hey, you know what, I think I want to help in some way, some capacity, some form, there's two ways that we end up doing this. One way is relief. And this is the easiest, it's the most common way that we end up offering help to needy people. We see a need and we go, hey, what's something I can do to just offer a little bit of relief? Whether it's, hey, let me give you a little bit of money, let me give you just a little bit of encouragement, but let me just kind of be there with you and just say a quick prayer with you. I mean, it is relief. And it's something that we just do. We can do it immediately. We can do it quickly. And then we just kind of move on and we kind of go on with our life. But there's a second type of support that we talked about, and that is restoration. And restoration, we don't do this one nearly as much as we do relief. Because see, restoration, it takes a lot more of our time. It takes a lot more of our resources. It takes a lot more of our energy. That we have to be committed. We have to come alongside people. And it's like we're actually getting involved in a little bit of rehab work, rehabilitation, and we work on helping to restore them. And that's a second type of support. And what we did when we were talking through all of this is we said, well, we need to understand, well, how is it that we're supposed to go about helping needy people when we know of needy people? How is it that we should be going about and helping them? And when we talked about two different things. We said that when there's somebody needy, what we need to do is we need to give them what they need and not just what they want. We have to give them what they need and not just what they want. That sometimes people are just going to want to hand out. And they're going, hey, can you just help me out? But many times what they need is they need a hand up. And so we have to give them what they need and not just what they want. Another thing when we look at helping needy people is that we should not rescue needy people from their consequences. That sometimes their consequence is exactly what they need. That they need to deal with and live with this consequence so that they can make the adjustments that need to be made in their life. And we finished this thing up when we kind of wrap this whole thing up and think about it with, we're all going to be needy at one point. Whether you're the person that's going, hey, I'm not in need right now and everything's okay right now, we're all going to be needy at some point in our life. And if we're honest, it'll be needy again. Because we hit these different seasons of when we are in need. Well, today we're going to talk about critical people. Critical people. We've talked about needy people. Today we're going to talk about critical people. Next week, you're not going to want to miss because we're going to talk about hypocritical people. It's like, oh man, I'm going to be there for that. I know lots of those people. I need to figure out how to get along with them. Well, today we're going to talk about critical people. And I'm just kind of curious, and some of you, I'm going to ask you this question. Some of you guys are going to go like, I want to show you that that's me, but I'm sitting next to the person that you just asked me about, so I'm not going to raise my hand. But I wonder, how many of you have somebody or several someones in your life that seems to nitpick almost everything. Now, little things, big, that they just seem to nitpick in your life. Anybody? Yeah, too many of you guys are going, yeah, I'm sitting next. I can't. Well, I want to. I mean, just look at my eyes. My hand's up. Look at my eyes. It's up. You know, we do life, and we get around these people, and when we get around people that are just kind of nitpicky, and it's like, oh, I can't do anything right around you. Well, let's look at a flip side of that. This one's going to be a whole lot easier, especially if they're sitting next to you. They're going to be like letting you know, you should raise your hand up. And that is, how many of you guys have somebody in your life that they're being critical of you, and their criticalness is something that is welcome, because you look at that and you go, you know what, they're speaking into my life, they're seeing these things, and they're trying to help me, and their help is welcome, and I am grateful that I've had some people in my life that have shared with me things that are kind of in my blind spot, and I just need somebody else to kind of help point some things out and help show me. How many of you guys have somebody like that in your life? See those, we need more of those critical people in our life. We need those people that care enough that they're going to be willing to put themselves out there. They're going to risk it a little bit to let you know what they're seeing. Some of us will go out of our way and we'll invite somebody. We'll say, hey, will you please? Not very many of us, but some. But others, you just begin to have these relationships where you know. So sometimes you're going, hey, you know what? I'm just going to hire somebody. If you work for somebody, you might be going, hey, can I just hire a coach? Can I just get somebody to kind of tell me kind of where I'm off and where I'm on, and they can just kind of come in and they can kind of guide me along the way? That's certainly something I've done over the years as I've led Crosspoint, is hiring a coach to lead me so that I can learn from them, so they can see who I am, and they can kind of show me the warts that I can't see about who I am and how I'm leading. Because it's so valuable to be able to get that and to be able to learn what is it that I could be doing, what is it that I'm blind to. You know, I think when it comes to critical people, that some of us are either guilty of this, or we certainly have been around plenty of people that do this, and it's the people that put the cry in critical. You know, I know that for me, I've done that, not because I've wanted to. I didn't want to just bring somebody to tears, but I'm just kind of pointing some things out and showing things and how they need to be. And I end up bringing the cry out of people, that I'm the guy that's bringing it. And so when we look at doing life with critical people, it certainly is something that takes place. I think that there are some people, they've been so beaten up with criticism over the years that they don't even know how to handle positive criticism. They can't even receive it as a positive thing. That for some people, positive criticism is an oxymoron. It's like jumbo shrimp. It's like, what? That doesn't go together. Positive and criticism. But there is such a thing as positive criticism. And those people that are going, hey, I just want to help you. And I want to help you see some things. I want to help you try to make some adjustments where if you'll make these adjustments, the payoff will be worth it. And it's some people they just don't even know how to handle that positive criticism because they've just been so beaten up. I think there's also some people that their skin is just so thick that there's no amount of criticism that penetrates. It can be positive, it can be negative. It's like they can't, they're deaf to criticism. And they won't even make some of the changes that would be great changes to make when there's positive criticism in their life, because it just doesn't penetrate. They just can't see it. They can't understand it. You know, some people, when it comes to criticism, they love corrective criticism. And other people, when it comes to this corrective criticism, this positive criticism, they loathe it. They just can't say, any kind of criticism is bad. Any kind of negative criticism, it's negative. And so what do we do, and how do we live with this? How do we adjust for this? Because, see, you're going to be on the receiving end of criticism. Some of us here, more than others, are going to be on the giving end of it, but we're all going to be on the receiving end of criticism. It's coming. And the more you step up, the more you get involved in leadership, the more responsibility you take. Whether you go from, hey, I'm just kind of doing life and having fun and I'm single, and then you get married, and it's like, oh, well, then you just open yourself up. There's going to be more criticism. You get used to that and everything's kind of going and flowing and you're okay with that, and you decide to become a parent. Well, there's welcoming a lot of criticism. And that criticism at first, it doesn't come from your kids because they don't know anybody. They can't tell you. All they can do is cry and let you know they got diaper attention that's needed. They need to be fed. But whether it's your in-laws, whether it's your own parents, I mean, you got people that are letting you know, whether it's other people that you know that they've already been down that path and they're letting you know, you really should. You welcome criticism, the more responsibility that you take on in life. It is coming. And criticism, it can be helpful. It really can. It can be something that when we hear this and we hear it in the right way and we're willing to make some thoughts, make some adjustments and look at it and go, hey, what is it about that might be true, and what is it that I could or should be doing with that? That I've got a friend that he's another pastor. He's in our community, and one day he told me, he says, well, I think feedback is the breakfast of champions. It's the breakfast of champions is to get feedback, and you can't get feedback without criticism. That it's going to be there. I think that we all tend to be critical. I just don't think there's anybody in this room that's exempt from being critical. It just depends on the subject of whether or not you're going to be critical. Maybe that subject is the government. Maybe that subject is just politics in general. Maybe that subject is POTUS, whoever the president is. That we all tend to be critical. Maybe it's of our school or of a teacher, of our kids. We all tend to be critical somewhere along the way. Whether it's the relationships, whether it's the boss that we have, we all tend to be critical. Where you end up putting your money and spending your money, you get really critical about. And you put good money out there and you feel like you didn't get the goods for the good money you put out there, oh yeah, you get critical. In fact, years ago, Dillard's did a study. And with this study, what they wanted to find out is, hey, when people come in and they have an experience with us, what happens with that? What do they do with that? And here's what they found out. They found out that for every customer that had a positive experience with them, they went and told 4 other people about that positive experience. It was like, hey, wow, that's great. We're able to get people to go out there and tell things about it. And so this is great. And they're like, oh, that's wonderful. Until they got the rest of the report. And the rest of the report was, when people have a negative experience with you, they tell 17 people about that negative experience. And just think about that. We can all relate to that. We have something really happens good, and it's great, and it's positive, and it's like, oh yeah, I need to tell a couple of people. But we have something that's like goes negative and goes south, and we just can't believe. Oh, you can't shut us up. It's like, oh, did I tell? Oh yeah, oh, I already told you that. Okay. We don't even remember who we told. We just want to make sure we're telling anybody and everybody that will listen to us. And so, let me tell you again, because I've thought about it a little bit more, and I think I have some more details. We're all going to get critical. It just depends on what that subject is of whether or not we get critical of it. And criticism, it happens. The criticism happens to us. And we're going to look, starting in this book of Numbers, we're going to be in a few different places this morning, but we're going to start looking in the book of Numbers. Numbers is the very 4th book in our Bible. That if you go all the way to the front, the book of Genesis, and you turn the 4th book in our Bible. I love the fact that we have a book in our Bible called Numbers, because it just says that numbers are important to God. And some people are going, nah, I don't want to talk about numbers. Numbers are important to God. He has a book in the Bible called Numbers. Well, in this book, Numbers chapter 12 is where we're going to get our start. It says, while they were at Hazeroth, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. Now, you might be in church for the first time or the first time in a long time, and you're like going, okay, I don't know anything of what you just said. That just sounded like all foreign gibber to me. So here's the thing. There's this guy named Moses that God had singled out, and he said, hey, Moses, I want to use you to set all of my people free, the Israelites, free from captivity. They were captive in Egypt. Moses is a guy that he had been raised by the Egyptians because he was born at a time that the Egyptians were concerned that there was too many men, boys being raised, and there was going to be too much of an uprising of these boys turning into men, and so they were killing off these babies. Well, Moses' mother didn't want her son killed, and so she put him in a basket and coated it and put it in a river and pushed it down toward Pharaoh's daughter's bathing place. And she was like, oh, a baby. I think I'll take this one to be my own. And so he's raised by the Egyptians for 40 years. He ends up fleeing them. He spends another 40 years being a shepherd. And now God has singled him out and said, hey, Moses, I'm going to use you to set my people free. And so now Moses has gone in, has been used by God. He's led out millions of Israelites out of the captivity of Egypt. And now he's moving them into this promised land, this land that God had promised a guy named Abraham when he started the nation of Israel. He said, I'm going to give you a land flowing with milk and honey, the best land on the planet I'm going to give, and it's going to be yours. So they're in this process, okay? And while they're in this process, there's two people that's identified. Miriam, who's his sister, and Aaron, who's his brother. And they give a complaint. They criticize Moses for marrying a Cushite woman. That they just can't believe it. Now here's the interesting thing. He's been married to her for years. This isn't like, oh, they just had their honeymoon. He's coming back from his honeymoon and he's getting this credit. They've been married for years. But the backstory is this. That God had been working through Moses to do these incredible things. And as he's working through Moses, one of the things that he does is Moses is letting God know a little piece of his mind at times, and you're like going, wow, they have a unique relationship, because how do you let God get a piece of your mind and still be blessed by God? But he was able to do this. And he just spoke for the people, and he spoke to God. And God said, hey, I want you to pick 70 people. 70 people that you would consider to be elders, these wise leaders among the people. And I'm going to give them a portion of the blessing that I've blessed you with for this period of time. And they're going to get to see what that's going to be like. And so he does this. And somehow, some way, this jealousy begins to be triggered with Miriam and with Aaron. Because look at this with me in verse 2. They said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too? That what they did is they throw out a criticism, something about Moses' personal life that they criticize because they're jealous of his public ministry. They're jealous of what he's able to do, his position that he has publicly. And so they begin to criticize something about him privately. That they didn't deal with the real issue. See, the real issue was their jealousy and their pride. They're going, hey, we're special too. Why didn't we get to be one of those 70? Why didn't we get to feel what that was like, to have that blessing of God on us for that period of time? Why didn't we get that? And they're jealous. And their criticism was a diversion of the real issue. And so when we look at this, we get to see in the second part of this verse, it says, but the Lord heard them. It didn't say the Lord heard them. It says, but the Lord heard them. That's not a good but. That is a uh-oh kind of but. That is, the Lord heard them. And then you get this in verse 3. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. And it's this verse that it kind of seems like, wait, what's up with that? What's that about? What's going on? But I think it's the context that is needed to be able to understand what goes down. That he's humble, he's mild, he's meek, he's a strong leader when he's leading the whole country, the whole nation of Israel. But as a person, as an individual, he's just a humble guy. And so he's getting this criticism, and I think this gets put in here because he's a guy that's just going to kind of just let it roll right off. He's not even going to touch it. He's just going to kind of move on in his life from this. Verse 4, so immediately the Lord called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and said, go out to the tabernacle, all three of you. I think this is God's version of go to your room. And he sends them to the tabernacle. He says, so the three of them went to the tabernacle. Then the Lord descended in the pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tabernacle. And that's what he would do. He would descend as this pillar of cloud during the day, and you would know that's where God's presence is. Aaron and Miriam he called, and they stepped forward. And can you imagine that stepping? It's like, do I or don't I? Or do I look down? Just that. They are hearing the audible voice of God. And God's not happy with them and the choices that they've made, the criticism that they have done. Verse 6, and the Lord said to them, now listen to what I say. If there were prophets among you, I, the Lord, would reveal myself in visions, and I would speak to them in dreams. That's what he would do. But not with my servant Moses. Of all my house, he is the one I trust. That Moses is the one that God trusts. He said, I speak to him face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the Lord as he is. So why were you not afraid to criticize my servant Moses? Why were you not afraid? Didn't you know who I am? Didn't you know that this would be one that I would be protecting? Didn't you know that I wouldn't put up with this? Not from you. And this is what God is saying to them. Verse 9, the Lord was angry with them, and he departed. And as the cloud moved away from the tabernacle, there stood Miriam, her skin as white as snow from leprosy. She didn't walk in there with this, but she's walking out with this skin disease of leprosy. And when Aaron saw what had happened to her, he cried out to Moses, oh, my master, please don't punish us for this sin that we have so foolishly committed. Don't let her be like a stillborn baby already decayed at birth. And so if you were to read on just a few more verses, you would find that she had to go through a process and go through the ceremonial cleansing. And in 7 days, she was fine again. But this was God dealing with criticism. Listen, criticism happens. See, sometimes criticism is friendly. So sometimes it's this friendly thing. You know, ladies, this is probably the best way I can express friendly criticism. That when you got a girlfriend and you're not going to get together and you're not going to go out and do this thing and you're like, well, how do I look? And she tells you, girl, you don't want to go out in that. So that's friendly criticism. That she's looking out for you and go, no, there's something better. Let's clean you up a little bit. That's friendly. That's friendly criticism. Then there's objective criticism. And that objective criticism it's just trying to deal with the situation the way it is. And it just kind of deals with it, and it's not being subjective. It's just coming in and going, hey, this is where it is. Whether it's a performance evaluation, whether it's, hey, you've set out the household rules and the kid broke the rules, and so now you've got this objective criticism, you're dealing with it, and here's the punishment that's going to come. It's objective. And then there's hostile. Hostile criticism. And I think this is usually what comes to mind when we think of criticism. When we hear the word criticism, we just automatically go to hostile criticism. And we don't like to be part of that. We don't like to be around it. We don't like to hear it. Sometimes we like to dish it, but we certainly don't like to have it delivered to us. But these are these different ways that criticism ends up coming in. And wouldn't it be great to hear a message about how to live your life criticism-free? How to live your life criticism-free. Well, I don't have that message. Matter of fact, I don't think anybody could have that message. Because I think that you could be perfect. And you're not. But I think that you could be perfect and you would still get criticized. Now, I'm not going out on a limb when I say that. Because, see, Jesus was perfect. And Jesus was criticized. So the fact that you're on the receiving end of criticism, it's not necessarily based on how much wrong is happening in your life. That sometimes the critics are just going to come along and hate. It's going to be hostile, and they're just going to hate. Even though you might not have done anything wrong. Because criticism happens. And so I want us to look at this and think about this in a way that we could try to understand this better. So I want you to think of this container here as the criticism zone. And sometimes we get thrown into the criticism zone. We didn't want to go in there. We weren't like going, ooh, pick me, can I? We just get put in there. And when we get put in here, the critics, they just begin to give us their criticism. And they just want to pile it on. And sometimes that criticism can be friendly, but sometimes that criticism can be hostile. And other times that criticism will be objective. That what they might say to us is, they might say something like, you know what, you always, and then they'll ramble on about what you do that's wrong. They might say, well, how many times have you? And they're going to criticize you. They're going to criticize you for the way you dress. They're going to criticize you for the way you talk. They're going to criticize you for the way that you are silent when you should be talking. They're going to criticize you about the volume in which you talk, but you just get criticized. And when we think about getting criticized, criticism is this thing that it seems to just come along, get piled in to our lives when we get in this zone. We don't know how to get out. We don't know how to escape it. And it turns out that once that criticism is done being delivered, we're buried by it. We are buried by it, and we are crushed by the criticism. That it just comes down, and it comes down so heavy, it comes down so fast, we're like dumbfounded, we don't know what to do, we didn't ever see it coming, and we just get buried by the criticism. We get thrown in this zone, and we didn't know what to do. Well, let me give you 3 specific types of criticism that I think happen in our lives. These 3 different types, 3 types of criticism. One is accurate criticism. It's accurate. It is based on facts. It is actual. It is certainly something that has taken place. It is objective. This is what we look at and we say, this is accurate criticism. Essentially, it's valid. It is legit criticism. Now, here's the thing about accurate criticism. Accurate criticism might not be 100% accurate. That somebody, when they're criticizing you, might use the word always and never. They might say, you always drop the ball on this account. And you go, no, because 3 months ago you praised me because I actually didn't drop the ball on it that month. You don't dismiss it because they use one word that makes it go, it's only 98% accurate, so it's really not accurate. No, it's essentially accurate. And so it's valid. And that's accurate criticism. It's criticism that is valid. There's another type of criticism, and that is inaccurate criticism. Inaccurate. That what it's based on is it's incorrect. That it's got some false premises, it's got some false understandings, and it is not true. It's inaccurate. There might even be a little bit of truth in there. And that's usually where the haters come along, and they just have just a little bit of truth that they throw at you and then criticize you on things that really aren't factual. And then the third type is malicious criticism. Malicious criticism, that's the criticism, it's motivated by jealousy. It's motivated by anger. It's this thing that comes along, and it's motivated by somebody else's frustration, somebody else's hurt. And it is malicious criticism. And malicious criticism always has a hidden agenda. See, these are these three types of criticisms. And so let's look at how do we respond? What's the best way for us to respond to these criticisms? So how to respond to criticism? One, use accurate criticism as an opportunity to change. Take this accurate criticism and say, I'm going to use that as an opportunity to change. I really didn't ask that. I really didn't want to hear about that, but you told me about it, and now I know. And maybe it is, hey, I asked. I really wanted to know. Thank you for telling me. But use accurate criticism as an opportunity to change. In the book of Proverbs, it's a book of wisdom in our Old Testament. And in Proverbs chapter 15, there's 3 verses starting in verse 31. If you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. If you reject discipline, you only harm yourself. But if you listen to correction, you grow in understanding. Fear of the Lord teaches wisdom. Humility precedes honor. You know, it takes humility to be able to be on the receiving end of criticism and be willing to make some changes. That we can't be defensive, because that's where we normally go. If there's unwelcome criticism coming at us, we jump into defense mode way too many times. And if we would just slow down enough and hear what that criticism is, and we would process that and think through that and go, well, what about that is true? What about that might be something I need to look at, that I might have to address? What is it that if I were to address that, how is it that I could become a better person? But if we're defensive, it'll be very hard for us to get into that mindset. And so we've got to slow down long enough, because I believe that criticism can be a God-given instrument. This God-given instrument for needed correction. But we can't be defensive if that's the way it is going to work in our lives. All right, so that's how to respond to criticism that's accurate. So how to respond to criticism? Use inaccurate criticism as an opportunity to teach. Use it as an opportunity to teach. When somebody's, they've got the facts wrong, they've got the backstory wrong, they don't really understand it, that we would take and use this as an opportunity to teach. There was a significant event that took place in the book of Acts. And we're going to look at this in Acts chapter 11. So soon the news reached the apostles. This is verse 1. Soon the news reached the apostles and the other believers in Judea that the Gentiles had received the word of the Lord. Now, you might not understand the significance of what was being said right here. That whenever the word Gentile gets put out there, people get classified into one of two groups. You're either a Gentile or you're a Jew. That's it. There's no other categories when this is what you're looking at. And so the Jews were seen as God's special people, his holy line, this line that went all the way back to Abraham, and God selects special people, the people that Moses had even led out of captivity. And the word got back that Gentiles, people that weren't part of this special spiritual heritage, that they have now received the word of the Lord. Verse 2, but when Peter arrived back in Jerusalem, the Jewish believers criticized him. So context clues tell us this. Oh, Peter was the one sharing the word of God with the Gentiles. And so now the other believers, the apostles, they are criticizing him for having done this. Verse 3, you entered the home of Gentiles and even ate with them, they said. Then Peter told them exactly what had happened. Not to eat with them, that would have been a whole other issue, because the things that they would eat, they believed were forbidden because of the law, the Old Testament law. You can't eat this. But Peter had been given a vision by God, not just once, but 4 different times. And this vision that was given to him by God was this vision that let him know that, listen, what God calls clean, we can't call unclean. What God calls worthy, we can't call unworthy. What God calls acceptable, we can't call unacceptable. And the Jewish people had been believing that the Gentiles were not acceptable by God. And God was using this as a message to share with Peter. Share me. Share my good news. And they could connect the dots and go back to the things that Jesus had said before and go, oh, Jesus was kind of alluding to this before. Jesus was even showing this, and Jesus was even caring for Gentiles. And so after he shared all of this, verse 18, when the others heard this, they stopped objecting, and they began praising God. And they said, we can see God has also given the Gentiles the privilege of repenting of their sins and receiving eternal life. What had looked inappropriate from afar looked completely different when they began to be surrounded by the facts. And so we need to use inaccurate criticism as an opportunity to teach. And we need to use malicious criticism as an opportunity to extend grace, undeserved favor and kindness. That even though it's malicious, that we would respond in a way that we're going to give them undeserved kindness. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 and 44, this is part of that Sermon on the Mount that we looked at a little bit last week. You have heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. See, something wonderful happens when we take an attitude of grace towards those people who act maliciously toward us. And this wonderful thing that happens is their criticism. It can't bury us. That when we extend grace, their criticism, it can't bury us. So there's another way for us to look at what we do and how we handle criticism. That when the criticism comes, that what we need to do is we need to shake it off and step it up. That even when that criticism, it's accurate and it's intended to be helpful. It's friendly, but it kind of hurt. We have to shake it off and step it up. That when that criticism, it's objective, and we ended up hearing something about ourselves that we really weren't wanting to hear. We have to shake it off and step it up. When that criticism is malicious, that is meant to hurt, we have to shake it off, and step it up. And every time that criticism comes, if we'll be humble and we're willing to go, you know what, I'll listen to that. But I'm going to shake off the hurt, and I'm going to step it up. That I'm going to look for what is there anything that's true with that? Maybe there's only even 2% truth to what it is that you said. And I'm going to consider that. But I'm going to shake it off, and I'm going to step it up. And when we continue to do this with every piece of criticism that comes our way, that we're willing to listen to it and take it, not act defensively, and we shake it off, we step it up. When we do this, it'll cause us to rise above all of the criticism and eventually be freed from the pit, the zone of criticism. That we don't have to be buried by it. We got to shake it off. And then we got to step it up. And when we shake it off and we step it up, we can rise above and rise out of criticism that otherwise could bury us. I want to give you what we're going to call the criticism prayer. That if you're that person, that you're on that receiving end of criticism, this is that criticism prayer. God, help me to know when to receive criticism. God, help me to know when to receive criticism and when to reject criticism. That I would be able to know, is that something I need to look at and I need to make some adjustments with my life? Or is that somebody just doing some hate? God, help me know. Because it is a dangerous thing when we put somebody else's thoughts about us ahead of our Heavenly Father's thoughts about us. So God, help me to know when to receive criticism and when to reject it. Pray with me. God, I thank you that you give us understanding of what we need to do when criticism happens. And God, I pray that we as people, that we would be willing to go, I want to slow down. I want to process. I am willing to hear. But not just to be hearing it just so we can be buried and crushed by it. So that we can process it and we can look and see, what is it about that criticism that might be true? What is it about that criticism that I might need to make some adjustments in my life? God, help us to have that kind of a heart. God, help us to be willing to be brave enough and have a teachable moment in that inaccurate criticism when it comes our way. But God, help us to remember that people matter and they matter to you, and that sometimes we're a voice of criticism to others. And I pray that you would give us your heart on this, that the way that we would speak to others, we would speak to them in love and not in hate. But God, we trust that when we have your perspective, your thoughts for our life, and we put those higher than other people's thoughts for our life, that we can step it up and we can shake it off. Jesus, it's in your name we pray.